Hello, Spectrum Women. It is I, Becca Lory Hector here, and I am back with Asking Spectrum Women. It has been a while, you guys. I filmed the October Asking Spectrum Women quite some time ago. And as you know, as I told you, I took off November and December for my seasonal depression, so I could kind of unload my plate a little bit. And everybody else was pretty busy with the holidays, so I figured we'd be okay there. And then this January, I came back and asked for questions again, and here we are with February's installment of Asking Spectrum Women. I'm so excited to be back doing this. I really enjoy getting your questions and sort of the challenge of sort of wrapping my mind around your question and then figuring out how my knowledge can help explain some of the struggles that you're having. That does not make me the knower of all things. It just makes me someone who's had some lived experience as well as some learned experience. And I'm just trying to use it to help us out and get through life right now in the real. So that's where we are with Asking Spectrum Women. And I wanted to thank you guys so much because I was afraid that with all those few months off, I would have no questions and nobody having questions for me, having forgotten that I do this every month. But to my surprise and my joy, I have received so many questions from you guys in all the different formats that I can get them, that I'm not even sure I'm going to get to all of them this time. So if you did ask a question, I should have responded that I got it from you. And it goes on to the list that I keep, or rather the screenshot of lists that I keep of all of your questions for the next month. So if you asked me a question and I said, yes, I got it, and I would add it to the list, my hope is that I will get to it this time around. But if I don't, it stays there on the list and I will get to it first the next time around. If your question is urgent and time sensitive, please email me back and let me know you'd like a response via email before I get to it on Asking Spectrum Women. I'm happy to do that for you. I don't want anybody sitting with a stuck point waiting for me to get to it on here. That's just silliness. But yes, my hope is that when you ask your questions of me, my answers will help not just you, but the other people who may be struggling with something similar, right? And it might give someone else an idea of how to handle the stuff in their life. And with that, well, let's get started. Let's get to the first question, right? Let's see, here we are, my handy dandy screenshots of questions. Question is there any link between narcissistic personality disorder and autism? Well, this is really interesting. So I think the link is diagnostic. And I will explain that. So it's not just narcissistic personality disorder, but in fact, a lot of the different personality disorders have similar symptomology to some of those of us with autism, right? So there's some overlap of symptomology that can look the same on the outside, but is coming from a different why for the different things, right? So one of the things that autistics struggle with is theory of mind, right? And understanding other people's feelings. And that can often come across as us looking very self-centered, also looking very self-absorbed. It can also make us look kind of arrogant, right? And those terms, the way that we make people feel with that, because of our lack of theory of mind, can also come across a little bit narcissistic, right? We don't mean it to, and that's because we aren't processing theory of mind very well, right? Whereas someone who is really struggling with narcissism will also present as self-centered, selfish, right? Egotistical. They will also represent that way, but their why behind that behavior is very different. And so that is what we need to look at. Right? So when we see somebody who is displaying narcissistic tendencies, how we determine between narcissism, borderline personality disorder, which also has some components of egotism and self-centeredness to it, right? And autism, they're all very different. The why behind each one is very different. Can autistic people also have narcissistic personality disorder? Yes, they can. Can autistics also be borderline? Yes, Yes, they can. Those things are mental health conditions. Autism is not a mental health condition. Autism is a neurological condition. It is a neurodevelopmental disorder rather than being a mental health condition. So our why comes from the way that our brain is connected rather than some kind of mental health trauma that we may have had, right? Okie dokie. So when we think about things like bipolar, borderline, narcissistic personality disorder, even sometimes dissociative personality disorder, or dissociative identity disorder, that we can see symptomology that overlaps, that is similar, that mimics each other. And that's why we go to professionals to be diagnosed, because they spend more time looking at a bigger picture and not just that one little piece, right? And that's what helps the diagnosis come out. So I hope that that has answered your question a little bit. If you need more information on that, feel free to email me for that. I can send you links regarding narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, all of the other ones as well, and that kind of thing. But let's make sure that we look at them as distinctly different, right? Because you can have both. You can be an autistic with borderline, and that is absolutely possible. And so let's make sure that we're clear about that. Next question. This question is an anonymous question, and it is basically about when we are younger, some of us get really obsessed with people in our lives. Some of us get really attached to certain people. They can be people of our own age. Sometimes they're not people of our own age. And the question is really, could you shed some light on people as a special interest? Is that possible? Well, yes. And so what happens for us, I think, in terms of people and the people as a part of a special interest, it falls into two categories to me. One is that it's a historical person and that person becomes a special interest. So understanding them historically, all the things that they left behind. For example, I happen to love Albert Einstein. He is one of my special interests. I know a lot about him. I know a lot of the things that he's written. I don't even do physics, but I understand a lot of his equations just because I really felt connected to him. And it was something that I wanted to learn about in many of the ways, in the way that many of us rather feel about our special interests. At the same time, I've also known people that aren't necessarily, that are not necessarily in my life, but they're kind of famous. And I've also become obsessed, sort of, or they've become a special interest. So somebody like, let me think of somebody really fast. So for a while, for somebody like Angelina Jolie. So for a while in my 30s, I was really obsessed with Angelina Jolie. And I really liked the way she dressed. I liked her style. I liked the way she carried herself. And she became a special interest for me. And we've talked about this a little on my live stream, unrelated, in terms of role models and mentors and things too. So that was somebody that I was sort of had as a special interest for quite some time. And that's a person, right? So we have that version of that. And then there's the more intimate version of that, which is when it's somebody you actually know and see on a regular basis that you become obsessed with, or they become your special interest. And the reason I think that happens for us is because that experience of connection with another human being is so rare for us until we start meeting other autistic people and know that we're autistic, that when we find that connection, it's such a good feeling that we want it all the time. We're like, oh my God, I can't get enough of this person, which is much like what happens to us when we have a special interest. I can't get enough of that thing that I'm being a special interest about. We, of course, write a line now, though, when it's someone that we know and we see every day, and our interactions with them aren't so limited, right? We have the potential for stepping over boundaries, like being too physically close to that person, feeling the need to stand really close to them and not being aware of it, right? Staring, we can tend to do a lot of staring, and that can be really upsetting to people on the other side of it, right? And then, of course, we get into the danger zone of like stalking behavior, right? When we become really obsessed. And what we don't want to do is for people to misunderstand that interest in this person as negative, right? As something that it puts that other person in danger or something like that, or puts us in danger in any way. And I think that what we need to remember in that situation is that there's something about that person's energy and that relationship or being around them that is acting like a special interest for us. And we need to remember that it's not an innate object, this person. It's a person, right? And they have feelings and boundaries too. And what we have to make sure of is that when we become kind of have a person as a special interest, that we don't step on their boundaries in an effort to get our fill, kind of thing. I think that's something that we can do. And we don't know what it is necessarily about that person. It could be the way that they talk to us. It could be the way that they look at us. Sometimes it's the way that they smell or the way that they dress or the way they speak even. That can be an attractor for us. As a little kid, I had a lot of struggle with boundaries with people who had accents, right? Wanting to imitate them all the time and listening to it all the time and wanting them to say certain words, right? And so that can be really annoying to another person. So the difference between people as special interests and inanimate objects as special interests, right, is that they're people. And we have to remember that they're experiencing what we're putting out there, and that can be overwhelming. And so that's what we need to be careful of. That is that question. And I hope that helped. I'm sort of, sometimes I guess to your answer. I guess towards your questions to make sure I'm understanding them. And sometimes I miss the mark because guess what? I'm autistic. So if I misunderstood that question, please re-ask it in another way and send it to me in an email. Okay. Moving on. Next question. Sometimes when I'm thinking about something that upsets me or I felt uncomfortable with, I respond out loud and don't realize it until afterwards. Is there a name for this? I don't know if there's a name for it, but there should be because I do it too. Which means that if you do it and I do it, chances are there's a bunch of other people out there that do it too. And maybe it has a name. Maybe it has something to do with impulse control, right? But I do too. So the thing is that I think that autistics have really strong inner monologues where we're constantly having a conversation with ourselves or three versions of ourselves and three different conversations at the same time, right? And what happens is I think when we are like rediscovering something that, or rethinking about something that has happened that was made us uncomfortable or turned out badly or whatever it was, because we have such a rich ability to remember those details, it's so real to us that we almost relive it. And what I feel like happens, it's like a verbal stim. You know, when you get so overwhelmed that you can't help, or you're just so, overwhelmed or over, I guess that's the best word for it, right? Where you're feeling so much, right? Or you're feeling anxious so much, or whatever you are in your situation that you can't keep your stim in, right? You can't not flap, you can't not do something, or you have to get up and walk, or whatever it is. I think this is like a verbal stim in that we are re-experiencing it in our heads so strongly that the feeling has to get out somewhere. And so our instinctual response is to verbally get it out. And so we're thinking so loudly in our heads about these particular words or this particular response that it comes out our mouths, right? And usually it's only like one or two words, but it's in like, I hate when it happens in like a silent room, right? And everyone else is busy doing their own thing, and all of a sudden I'm like, idiot, right? Or I do something like that out loud, right? And I do it. And I don't think that it's bad or anything like that. What I think is it's a verbal stim, like almost like a verbal tick, but like you're thinking about it so hard and it's so big and so real that it has to get out somehow, and it just, right? And so in that way, the way that sometimes you can't hold a stim in. That's the best that I've got for an explanation. If somebody out there in the world has heard of a term that describes this situation, the asker and I would appreciate the information. I love having the words to explain my experiences, but I do not have a word for it. I don't know. I'm going to call it a verbal stim for right now, even though, no, not really, because that's really echolalic and repeated. It's like that, I don't know. It's a verbal impulse, more like, I guess. I don't know. I'll keep thinking about it. Moving on. Next question. Does anyone else struggle with a job that has many different demands? When I am faced with many steps in a task or ambiguity in instructions or expectations, I really struggle. girl, you are not alone. Okay. First of all, having to deal with complicated tasks, demanding tasks, always happens at work. That's where the tasks I feel are most complicated. Wait, I want to go back and look at your question because you used a particular word. And many different demands. That was the other thing. So sometimes we have a job that's a multitasking job that has many different demands to it, right? And when we don't get clear instructions, that gets really frustrating. You are not alone in that feeling. I think all human beings, autistic or not, feel that way at some time or another during their job. And I think more often than not for autistics, we struggle with this. And I think that a piece of it has to do with executive functioning. So, and some of it might have to do with those of us who have ADHD on board with our autism too. Because it's hard to organize your materials, and it's hard to decide which things come in what order, which ones are a priority and which ones aren't a priority, and what order do I do them in, right? That's a lot of executive functioning thinking. And our brains can add into that equation things that we're having anxiety about, like, will it come out right? And am I doing it the right way? And all of those things. And so that makes our brains work even harder. So when we have jobs that the instructions aren't clear and we have to make up what we think it means, that is really hard on our brains. It's like another level of what was already difficult. And the same thing goes for when we have multiple demands from the same job, right? And deciding which ones get your attention first. That is human being hard, but then it's on another level hard for us because we have all this other stuff going on in our brains. And our loud brains make that difficult. What I suggest to make it easier in the workplace is to ask for certain accommodations. So you can ask for these accommodations as accommodations if you're disclosed at work. If you're not disclosed at work, you just want to go and ask for a favor. Could I have a favor? That's what we're going to call it, right? And you're going to go in and you're going to say, listen, I'm having a full plate. That's what I say to people. My plate is so full. I'm having some struggles with figuring out the order to do things, and I just can't see through the mess right now. So here's what I need in order for you to help me. If you could help me, I'd appreciate it. I would love it if you sent me all of my instructions in written form. So if you can email them to me, or you want to handwrite the note, but in written form, that would be the easiest and best for me. And this works for a couple of reasons. First of all, it makes the person giving you the instructions, when they have to write it down, they are forced to think about the steps. That's one. Number two is, when you have it in writing, when you get those overwhelm moments, like you can't figure out what to do first, or that wasn't clear, you have at least something in writing to go back to. And then if you still have questions, all you have to do is respond to that email, right? Here's the thing you told me. This is how I understand it. Am I right? Or did I miss something? Right? And that's something that, autistic or not, human beings do in the workplace. Everybody should want to be doing a good job. And when you want to do a good job, you should be making sure the instructions are clear to you, right? So that's my suggestion around this. First of all, you're not alone. It is really common for us because we have so much other noise going on in our brains that we can't filter out, that when multiple things come at us like that, it just becomes so overwhelming that figuring out the order in which to do them is almost the hardest thing. So I say, if you think you might be struggling with executive function at work and that organization piece and how to prioritize things at work, there is a great book out there. Let me read the title properly so I don't mess it up. It's called The Smart But Scattered Guide to Success. And it's all about figuring out how to work with your scattered thoughts. So please take a look at that book. If you need a link to it, you can email me that. And that is where I'm going to stop this week, you guys, or this month, you guys. I have another like 3 or 4 questions in there that I can't wait to get to. But it is about the time that I like to stop. Anything more than 20 minutes, I feel like gets a little boring on the internet, and my throat is starting to hurt from talking so much. So I'm going to stop there. That's February's Asking Spectrum Women. As always, you can comment to this video wherever you're seeing it, or you can email me directly at info@beccalory.com. Thanks so much for joining me, I guess, for the return of Asking Spectrum Women, and I hope I'll see you next month for the March edition. If you didn't get your question answered and you do need an answer in a timely manner, please go ahead and email me and let me know. I will send you an email response. If you're willing to wait, the questions that I didn't get to this month, I will absolutely get to next month because I'll start with them. So have an amazing rest of your February. Enjoy it. Love on yourselves as much as you love on others this month of love, because it'll be in your face all the time. But make sure you're loving yourself in there. Have a good one, you guys. And I will see you the next time on Asking Spectrum Women. Bye.